Chapter 2635. That day, Shui Leihan barged into the Holy Emperor Palace because of Zi Hao and had a big battle with him. In fact, saying that there had been a battle was giving Nan Po Yun too much credit. That battle had ended almost as soon as it had begun. Nan Po Yun had been slapped in the face by Dong Huang and had been sent flying on the spot. This was the entire process of that battle. The reason why Nan Po Yun was able to survive until now was partly because the saint came out right after that slap, and partly because Shui Leihan really couldn't be bothered to kill him. Otherwise, just that slap alone was enough to make him fall completely. Although Dong Huang was already recognized as a top expert in the world at that time, Nan Po Yun still considered that slap as the greatest humiliation in his life. This hatred had been suppressed for nearly 1,000,000 years. Meeting his old enemy again and hearing those words, Nan Po Yun's eyes immediately turned red. With a loud roar, he rushed forward. Then, dozens of experts from the Holy Emperor Palace also rushed forward to support him. This was a fixed tactic. Many top experts from the Holy Emperor Palace rushed forward under the provocation of Dong Huang's words. It was a flawless plan. And the rest of the people split up and rushed toward Chu Le, Tai Butian, and Wu Qianqian. Obviously, they were picking on the weak ones. This time, the experts from the Holy Emperor Palace actually came out in full force. It's spectacular. Looking at the black mass of people, the Demon Empress laughed mockingly. Where's your leader? Such a spectacular scene shouldn't be missing him, right? The sage's voice said, I didn't think that Xin would still remember me so much. Come, come, come. This seat will accompany Xin and reminisce about our parting. After that day, I still can't forget Xin. Another 100 or so people swarmed forward. He rushed into the battlefield that was in a complete mess. They rushed toward Mo Tianji and the others who had just stopped fighting. The entire southern sky forest, which had just finished a great battle, welcomed another bloody battle in the blink of an eye, an even more intense bloody battle. The previous battle was dangerous but not fierce, and there was no sign of blood. But at this moment, almost as soon as they started fighting, blood immediately burst out. The people from the Holy Emperor Palace consciously and purposefully entangled Dong Huang, the Demon Empress, Mo Tianji, Xiedan Qiong, and the others. As for Chu Yang and his women, they only used harassing attacks. It was somewhat insignificant. Facing such a situation, Mo Tianji, the East Sovereign, and the Demon Empress looked at each other. This kind of attack was obviously what they wanted. However, amidst the chaos, four silhouettes suddenly flashed into existence. Almost immediately after, another dark shadow appeared like a ghost. The 5 elven gods had appeared at the same time. One of them went straight for Chu Yang, who was still immobile, while the other 4 went straight for him. Their targets were Zi Sheqing, Wu Qianqian, Tai Butian, and Mo Qingwu. At this moment, Chu Le was surrounded by more than 10 peak-level experts. She couldn't break out of the encirclement at all. It could be said that she had her hands full. Ji Mo and Luo Ku Di saw that the situation was far from reassuring. He intended to rush over there. Mo Tianji and Xiedan Qiong were also attacking with all their might. In everyone's opinion, Chu Yang should be able to stand up by now. However, Chu Yang didn't stand up. This was far beyond everyone's expectations. How could there be a mistake at such a critical moment? This was really a big shock. Xiedan Qiong's viburnum flower shot out directly. For a moment, the entire southern sky forest was filled with a sea of viburnum flowers. Dong Huang Shui Leihan also rushed over with an imposing manner. Zi Sheqing and Mo Qingwu went all out. They protected Tai Butian and Wu Qianqian tightly behind them. At this moment, the 4 fairy gods rushed over together. They attacked at the same time. No one dared to be negligent. Success or failure depended on this. The 4 fairy gods all unleashed their full strength at this moment. That kind of dense fairy aura instantly filled the entire place. The situation was like this. They were completely out of control. It could be said that they were in imminent danger. However, right at this moment, something that no one could ever imagine happened all of a sudden. A white light suddenly appeared on Zi Sheqing and Wu Qianqian's bodies at this moment. The white light shot into the sky. Almost at the same time, a faint yellow light suddenly appeared on Tai Butian's body. Then, it also turned into a white light and merged with Zi Sheqing's and Wu Qianxian's white light. And on Mo Qingwu's body, who was in the middle of a battle, a red light inexplicably shot out and intertwined with the 3 white lights at an extremely fast speed. Seeing this scene, the 4 fairy gods were stunned as if they had been electrocuted. The 4 of them were instantly petrified. Their eyes were wide open as they looked at the sudden phenomenon in front of them. For a moment, they were completely motionless. Xiedan Qiong's viburnum flowers were not to be trifled with. They burst open on the bodies of the 4 fairy gods, but the 4 of them didn't move at all, as if they didn't feel anything. If it weren't for the fact that the viburnum flowers were too scattered at this moment and prioritized to conceal themselves, the 4 fairy gods would probably have died here for no reason. 4 lights. 1 red and 3 white lights shot into the sky and turned into a rainbow, connecting with Chu Yang on the ground as if they had a tacit understanding. And the one in charge of dealing with Chu Yang at this moment was the most mysterious dark deity of the fairy race. However, when this ray of light connected with Chu Yang, the dark deity suddenly stopped moving. He was completely petrified like the god of death, because, in between Chu Yang's eyebrows, a shadow like a full moon slowly emerged. It became clearer and clearer. Only then did he see that there was actually a crown-like shadow in this full moon. Seeing this, the dark deity was dumbfounded. He didn't care if he still had to maintain his invisibility. He just stood there in a daze with his mouth and eyes wide open. After a while, he finally said, "The aura of the Fairy Empress, the Fairy Emperor's seal." The Fairy Emperor's seal. This item that was highly anticipated by the fairy race actually appeared in the world at this most critical and fatal moment. The dark deity, who had always hidden in the dark and rarely appeared in front of others, was so agitated at this moment that his whole body trembled. It was as if he had lost his mind. Standing next to Chu Yang, she was actually exposed in front of the eyes of the world. At this moment, he completely forgot what he should be hiding. The world only knew that the Fairy Empress seal was the symbol of the fairy royal family. The highest authority. Even the sage only knew that it was an emperor's seal. It was like a jade seal, a symbol of a seal. This was actually the biggest reason why the arrow god and the others had doubts about the sage. And what exactly was the Fairy Emperor's seal, other than the higher-ups of the fairy race? No one else knew. The so-called Fairy Emperor's seal. It wasn't a seal at all. It was the symbol of the fairy royal family, where the fate of the fairy race gathered. In the fairy race, only the emperor could condense the fate of the entire fairy race to form a Fairy Emperor's seal on himself. And once the emperor died, the Fairy Emperor's seal would also immediately dissipate in the area where the emperor died. Only the bloodline of the fairy royal family could protect it. And there was also a person with a strong fate who made a great contribution to the fairy race. Only then could the Fairy Emperor's seal reappear. And during this process, the fairy royal family must be present. And there must be the approval of the soul aura of the deceased emperor. Anyway, in order to obtain a Fairy Emperor's seal, all the conditions were extremely harsh. Not a single one could be missing, even if it was the fairy race itself. It was also an extremely difficult thing to obtain a Fairy Emperor's seal. It couldn't be done without a great opportunity. In fact, the Fairy Emperor's seal that the Fairy Empress condensed was created by countless opportunities and countless coincidences. It was extremely difficult to replicate. This was also the fundamental reason why the fairy race had never tried to condense another Fairy Emperor's seal on their own, even though the Fairy Empress had been missing for a long time. It was definitely not something that could be snatched away by others. Originally, the 5 fairy gods had once suspected whether there was some special power in time that could trap the Fairy Emperor's seal at the moment when the Fairy Empress was about to dissipate. Although the chances were slim, the 5 fairy gods were still willing to try their best to imprison and preserve the Fairy Emperor's seal. At this moment, the 5 fairy gods all knew. The Fairy Emperor's seal in front of them couldn't be fake. It was real. Indeed, the Fairy Emperor's seal had reappeared in the world. And the Fairy Empress's aura appeared on the Fairy Emperor's seal at the same time. It was even harder to fake it. And This fairy emperor's seal actually appeared on the person that the sage had been instigating and wanted them to kill, Chu Yang. At this moment, the few of them almost fainted. If they really killed Chu Yang indiscriminately, wouldn't they be ruining the future of the entire fairy race? The fairy had killed the person who had the fairy emperor's seal. Was there anything more ridiculous than this in this world? At this moment, the 5 fairy gods' hatred toward the sage reached its peak in an instant. Cloud Master, could you trick us any more? But what surprised the 5 fairy gods the most was, or perhaps, what they couldn't understand was, why did the fairy empress's aura appear on 4 women at the same time? This was the most incomprehensible thing. If there wasn't the fairy empress's aura, then things would be easy to explain. The sage was telling the truth. Chu Yang was the illegitimate child of the Eastern Emperor and the Demon Empress. The fairy empress had fallen, and the fairy emperor's seal was confined by a special power and remained on Chu Yang's body. Because the appearance of the fairy emperor's seal was too obvious, this matter was settled. Any explanation would be futile. But, the fairy empress's aura appeared at the same time, and it appeared on 4 women at the same time. And these 4 women seemed to be closely related to the illegitimate child of the Eastern Emperor. This result was very thought-provoking. What was going on? The 4 fairy gods were all dumbfounded. They didn't move at all. If the experts from the Holy Emperor Palace didn't attack them, and if Chu Yang's people didn't kill them, the 5 fairy gods would probably have fallen here without knowing why. Over there, shouts of killing were still shaking the heavens. Thousands of experts from the Holy Emperor Palace were fighting with their lives on the line. The fighting strength of these people was rather impressive. For a moment, the battle was in a stalemate. The sage almost vomited blood. At such a crucial moment, why aren't the 5 of you moving? Are you trying to make me anxious to death? Chapter 26:36. If it weren't for the sudden silence of the 5 elven gods, Mo Tianji and the others would have been at an even greater disadvantage. Even if they didn't get rid of Chu Yang, they would have still targeted the others. This extremely unexpected situation made the Saint Monarch angry and anxious. What was going on? It was such a heaven-sent opportunity, and victory was already in their hands. Why did the elves suddenly stop moving? This time, the saint was prepared to pull the elves to his side, so he mobilized a huge force. Just like what the Demon Empress said, he was going all out. He intended to settle the situation in one fell swoop. The experts that the Saint Emperor Palace brought out this time, except for the scattered people in different worlds and the experts by the Saint Empress Shuexian side, basically no one was left out. To deal with the East Emperor Demon Empress, Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun, and the rest, all these forces had to be mobilized, plus the saint himself. Only then would he have enough chances of winning, only then would he create an opportunity for the elves to kill Chu Yang, so that the enmity between the two sides could never be resolved. The original plan had gone quite smoothly. Chu Yang, whose strength was not inferior to Donghuang's, had to train with his subordinates. He had to risk his life and use up all of his strength. Even the people who besieged him had lost a lot of their vital energy. It was really a self-inflicted evil. With such a heaven-sent opportunity, how could the saint seize it and launch an attack immediately? The saint's men restrained all the fighting forces except for Chu Yang and his 4 women, allowing the 5 elven gods to focus on Chu Yang and the 4 women. They didn't have to kill Chu Yang, but as long as any one of the 4 women died, given how much Chu Yang valued them, there would be no room for negotiation. It could only be a situation of life and death. But now, the saint's side was already bloody. The elves, who wanted to play the leading role, were all muted. How could the saint not be depressed? What the fuck was going on? Wasn't this too strange? Even if he was stupid, he shouldn't have done it at this time, Master Yun shouted, and the mountain river sword in his hand clashed with the demon king hook again. He flew up and said angrily, "Archer God, what are you guys doing? Why don't you take action with such a great opportunity? Do it. If not for the Demon Empress pestering him." Even Lord Cloud couldn't wait to kill Chu Yang himself and get rid of this great threat. However, his urging had no effect at all. The 5 elven gods were still standing there in a daze, completely dumbstruck. At this moment, the fairy emperor's seal in the air suddenly emitted a cloud of smoke. It merged with the light on the four women's bodies. Just as everyone was shocked to see such a miraculous scene, a graceful figure suddenly appeared in midair. His eyes were like spring water, his brows were like distant mountains, and his long hair was like clouds. She was pitilessly beautiful. Her beauty was unparalleled in this world. She was like a celestial fairy that had descended to the mortal world, illusory and ethereal, like the moon in the heavenly palace, clear and bright. Like a snow lotus on an iceberg, untainted by even a speck of dust. Like the scorching sun in the sky, shining down on the world. Just as this beautiful woman appeared, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. The 5 fairy gods couldn't help but tear up at the same time. Your Majesty, Wu Qiongxiao. The archer god looked at the beauty in the sky in a daze and muttered, Qiongxiao. Qiongxiao. This is you, it's you. Tears rolled down his cheeks. Heroes don't cry easily. Naturally, they would be sad at this moment. In midair, the elven empress's eyes slowly turned. Her eyes were moving, and they were moving. She slowly observed the bloody battlefield. Gradually, she shifted her gaze to the Cloud Lord, who was floating in midair. Her eyes finally met Cloud Lord's gaze at this moment. Everyone could clearly see the extreme shock in Cloud Lord's eyes at this moment. And infinite shock. He turned his head and was about to urge again when he happened to see this strange phenomenon. For a moment. It was as if someone had hammered on his heart. In his shock, his body was almost chopped into 2 by the demon empress Demon King Hook. The elven empress stood in midair, floating in the light, but her figure was still clear and stable. Then, she slowly reached out her hand and pointed at Cloud Lord. She actually said, "Kill this person." She appeared from nothing for the first time in hundreds of thousands of years in the Heaven Imperial Court. The first sentence she said was actually an order. And the person she wanted to kill was actually a great sage. After so many years, he once again heard Her Majesty's long-awaited command. The 5 elven gods, who seemed to be in a daze, trembled at the same time. Hot tears streamed down their faces as they responded at the same time. In the next moment, the 5 of them moved at the same time and launched their sharpest attacks at the same time. The first to move was the Dark God. With a turn of his body, he entered a dark shadow and disappeared. However, unknown attacks were the most unpredictable. They didn't know how to resist or defend. The archer god let out a long and shrill cry. Suddenly, a big green bow appeared in his hand. He drew the bow and aimed at the great sage. The soul-chasing arrow that killed the Devil Master was about to be released. It was aimed at Cloud Lord, the great sage. The mighty god and the other 2 roared and pounced forward with irresistible force. All the experts of the Saint Emperor Palace who blocked their way were killed mercilessly. In the blink of an eye, the 3 gods joined forces and formed a siege. Killing intent was everywhere. The Elven Empress' unexpected appearance, the Elven Emperor's seal reappearing in such a way, and the Empress's order all proved one thing. The great sage had been deceiving them all along. The 5 elven gods completely understood. This liar. Every word he said was a lie. He deliberately misled the elven race and set them up. This evil person was instantly hated to the core by the 5 elven gods and was branded with a must-kill mark. It was just as the sage himself had said, all of the layout and arrangements now only needed one more entry point, and also one more crucial point. As long as any one of these things was confirmed, then the rest would naturally come to light. And now, such a situation had occurred. Now, it was indeed a breakthrough. A key point had been accidentally exposed, and the rest would be instantly clear. However, the most ironic thing was that everything had gone against the great sage's original intention. The result was also the opposite of what he had wanted. The more he had said in the beginning, the more he would say. Now, the stronger the hatred he would suffer, the more people despised him, the more they would look down on him, and the more they would want to kill him. Since the result was the opposite, the great help that he had thought he could control naturally turned into great killing intent. Moreover, he had already taken action. An unforeseen event suddenly occurred. The scene immediately fell into extreme chaos. No one would have thought that the 5 elven race experts, who had been relying on the Great Wall and thought that they were the strongest means to kill the enemy, would suddenly turn against them at such a critical moment. Moreover, they did it so thoroughly. The experts on the Holy Emperor Palace's side were not prepared at all. Some who were fighting fiercely with Mo Tianji and the others were directly killed by the attacks from behind just because they were in the way. Not even a trace of them was left behind. The archer god was enraged. After the first soul-chasing arrow, all the subsequent arrows were extremely destructive soul-bursting arrows. They flew out like raindrops. Most of the Holy Emperor Palace's experts had their backs facing him. In front of him were enemies who were much stronger than him. How could he be caught off guard? Without making a sound, he fell to the ground and breathed his last. He was deader than dead. Since it was a divine soul-bursting arrow, he was naturally dead. In the blink of an eye, more than 200 experts from the Holy Emperor Palace were lying dead on the ground. In that misty place, bits of light gradually rose from their corpses. In an instant, they entered the body of the saint who was fighting with the demon empress. The archer god was shocked. His bow and arrow almost flew out of his hands. He shouted angrily, "Cloud Master! What a sanctimonious saint! It turns out that you are the master of the myriad saints' true spirit." Under the soul-bursting arrows, the primordial spirit of the archer would not be destroyed. Only the characteristics of the myriad saints' true spirit could do that. Today, Cloud Master's identity as the master of the myriad saints' true spirit was finally exposed. One mistake and the whole game was lost. He even exposed his biggest secret. The saint's face was ashen, but he did not say a word. He continued to fight fiercely. He pushed his cultivation to the limit and used all his strength. For a time, the demon empress was beaten back repeatedly. She was almost unable to fight back. At this moment, his heart was truly enraged to the extreme, and he only wanted to kill everyone in front of him. However, he could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought. What in the world was going on? What had happened? Why did the situation take a turn for the worse? It was completely out of control. The only feeling the saint had was that his luck seemed to be especially bad during this period of time. The Leia Heaven Imperial Court, which was originally like an iron bucket, was overturned one by one. Even the Holy Emperor Palace, which was recognized by the world, was completely destroyed. Not a single chicken or dog was spared. For millions of years, the myriad saints' true spirit bases that no one knew about were destroyed one by one in such a short period of time. His doppelgangers, whose cultivation was not inferior to his, were also destroyed. Even the primordial spirits that escaped were mostly destroyed by the enemy, and today, in the great battle that he had painstakingly planned and orchestrated, not only did both sides not die, they were actually able to create another 10,000 saints' true spirit base. The doppelgangers that he had painstakingly released had actually died a violent death on the way back. Last time, a small portion of them had managed to escape, but this time, all of them had been annihilated, not leaving a single trace behind. Then, there was today's battle. As long as there were any casualties, the elf race and Chu Yang's side suffered any casualties, and the elf race's side would be tied to the elf race's warship. They would fight to the death with the enemy, and would be completely used by the elf race's side. However, at the most critical moment, when the elf race could decide the outcome of the battle, another unforeseen event occurred. This was the most depressing thing. Something happened in my hometown today. I went back home and was busy the whole day. Just came back. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's talk about it after this month. I'll go right first. Chapter 2637. The Elven Empress, who had been missing for a long time, had reappeared. This sudden change had exposed all of his lies. However, this was not the worst part. The worst part was that the true spirit of the Holy Emperor Palace had been killed by accident, and the true spirit had returned. This meant that the secret that he had been hiding for more than 1,000,000 years had been exposed in public. All these tragedies came one after another. It was too much for the eye to take in. Even the saint, with his high mental fortitude, couldn't help but be at a loss after suffering so many blows. Now, what should I do? There was no way to deal with this at all. There was no other way. The only thing he could think of was destruction. There was only destruction. He might as well destroy the people in front of him. Everyone. Not a single one of them was allowed to live in this world. In this way, the secret was still a secret. But, could he really do it? For the first time in more than 1,000,000 years, the saint had doubts about himself. Everyone, be careful. Cloud Master is the master behind the 1,000 holiness true spirit. The arrow god shouted loudly. The arrows in his hands turned into shooting stars and flew continuously. He even shouted at the people from the Saint Emperor Palace. You are all from the Saint Emperor Palace. You should be righteous and ward off evil. Why are you still working for the master of the 1,000 holiness true spirits? The experts from the Saint Emperor Palace ignored him and continued to fight to the death. Xue Leihan sighed. Brother Arrow God. These people have already been turned into the 1,000 holiness true spirits by Cloud Master. They definitely can't be reasoned with. Only by killing them can they be freed. Bastard. Only then did the Arrow God realize. In a rage, he shot thousands of arrows. This time, it was an indiscriminate attack that swept through the whole place. The 5 elven gods attacked at the same time. The experts from the Saint Emperor Palace were attacked from both inside and outside. They were defeated step by step. Of course, each of these people was a top-notch expert. Their combat power was not weak. But they were not only facing Mo Tianji and the rest. There was also the 5-man team with the strongest combat power of the Elven race and Dong Huang. Their combined combat power was at least twice that of Di and the Empress. Without a doubt, this was definitely the most powerful force in the Heavenly Imperial Court. And this force was fighting and killing with them. Even if they were all experts and had the advantage in numbers, what was the use? How could they withstand such a crushing? Almost instantly, half of the people had died. They had all lost their lives here. Half of these people died at the hands of the elven archer god and Xie Danqiong. The elven archer god's arrows fell like rain, and Xie Danqiong's jasper flower sea changed from confusing the enemy to attacking indiscriminately in a large area due to the sudden betrayal of the 5 elven gods. How could the lethality of these 2 large area attacks be small? The sage saw that the situation was extremely bad. He forced himself to calm down, and the might of the mountain and river sword in his hand became even more intense. He hoped to defeat or even kill the demon empress as soon as possible, so that he could defeat the enemy and establish his dominance, and salvage the situation. If the demon empress was directly killed by him at such a moment, then it would be a great achievement that would be sufficient to or everyone present. However, what kind of experience did the demon empress have? Seeing that the situation was in her favor and that the saint was blindly attacking, she hoped that he could take her down. The demon empress simply gave up on attacking and switched to defense. She didn't seek to attack the enemy and only sought not to make any mistakes. The demon king's hook did its best to defend against the enemy while the saint tried in vain to defeat the demon empress. It was simply wishful thinking. And the situation was still continuing to develop in a direction that was unfavorable to the sage. A long whistle suddenly sounded, and a brilliant and dazzling sword light, like the scorching sun suddenly falling from the sky, rushed into the group of experts from the Saint Emperor Palace. The Fairy Emperor's seal, which had changed the stance of the fairy race, was shining brightly above the person's head. Calamity Sword. Chu Yang. At this moment, Chu Yang, who had recovered, finally rushed out and joined the battle. In fact, Chu Yang had already dissolved the medicinal efficacy of the heavy pill. It was just that the unexpected appearance of the Fairy Emperor's seal and the appearance of the Fairy Empress had caused him to pause for a moment. And in that short moment of stagnation, he almost exploded from holding it in. At this moment, he could finally make a move. So what if it was the ultimate version of Massacre the World? At this moment, Chu Yang really needed to vent. Especially when the medicinal efficacy of the heavy pill was still growing in his body. It was as if his whole body had swelled up, but he didn't have the slightest bit of strength to vent it out. Chu Yang shouted. Before the first sword strike was finished, another sword strike was launched. At least 300 experts from the Saint Emperor Palace were all killed by his two sword strikes. The ultimate calamity sword move's power was naturally extremely terrifying. Because of the abundant vital energy at this moment, the power of the ultimate calamity sword move could be said to be at its peak. 300 experts were killed in two sword strikes, and all of them were experts among experts. Such power was truly terrifying. After defeating the enemies with two sword strikes, Chu Yang didn't seem to need to catch his breath. He rushed towards the Saint Emperor with his sword. The sword light surged. The distance of 1,000 feet between the two was covered in a flash. At this moment, the Demon Empress Demon King's hook and the Saint Emperor's mountain and river sword collided once again. The Demon Empress staggered back, but the Saint Emperor didn't move at all. The Saint Emperor's cultivation was originally higher than the Demon Empress. At this moment, with the continuous deaths of the 10,000 saints' true spirits, although the Saint Emperor's strength was constantly decreasing, his own strength was constantly increasing. Under this situation, even though the Demon Empress was on the defensive, she was still at a disadvantage. The Saint Emperor was about to follow up with another attack, but Chu Yang had already rushed towards him with his sword at an unparalleled speed. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes, and Chu Yang was already standing in front of him. With a loud shout, it was like a thunderclap on a clear day. Following that, his sword brought along a thunderous explosion and slashed down brazenly. Smashing down. At this moment, there was no need for him to use any sword moves. What Chu Yang needed was purely a head-on collision, that kind of extreme collision. Only this kind of extreme and barbaric collision could vent the cultivation that was swelling in his body at this moment. If not for this, Chu Yang felt that he was going to explode in the next moment. It was a pity that the Saint Emperor wasn't clear about Chu Yang's current situation. If he knew, he would use a guerrilla tactic. As long as the battle dragged on for a while, Chu Yang might not be able to hold on and explode first. It was a pity that the Saint Emperor didn't know. Furthermore, Chu Yang's speed was too fast. The Saint Emperor, who was completely unprepared, had no time to dodge. He didn't even have time to change his moves. If he were to forcefully dodge, he would only be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, he was at the peak of his cultivation. Why would he be afraid of a head-on collision? If he could heavily injure Chu Yang in the midst of a head-on collision, it would be a great thing. He didn't believe that at such a young age, his cultivation could be compared to 1,000,000 years of bitter cultivation. In view of this, the Saint Emperor made up his mind and fiercely countered with the mountain river sword. As a result, two peerless divine weapons collided in the sky for the first time. At this moment, it was as if two meteors flying at high speed in the sky had suddenly collided. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion rang out, shaking the universe. The gods and devils were all shocked. Demons were silenced. Boom! A mushroom cloud soared into the sky, and a powerful shockwave spread out in all directions at an extremely fast speed from the place where Chu Yang and the holy sage were fighting. Not only did this shockwave spread at an extremely fast speed, it was also accompanied by a huge destructive power. A destructive power that was enough to kill people. The space within a radius of a few hundred feet had completely turned into a space crack and a space black hole. It was filled with the aura of death. It swallowed all life in this area that couldn't resist this power. In the surroundings, the weaker experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were hit by this shock wave until they bled from their 7 orifices. They couldn't stand and fell to the ground. Even Xue Leihan's body shook violently the moment he came into contact with the shockwave, his beard flying in the air. His opponent, Nan Poyan, was even worse. His whole body shook violently. He only felt his ears buzzing and couldn't hear anything. He immediately took a step back. At the same time, he was scattered. Xue Leihan was an expert. How could he miss this opportunity? With a long roar, the Grand Orient sword pierced into Nan Poyan's heart like lightning. At the same time, he kicked Nan Poyan's body into the air. His whole body was torn into pieces in mid-air. Then, Xue Leihan roared wildly. He raised his true chi again and his body turned into a huge sword light. He flew around the battlefield at lightning speed. Everywhere he passed, the experts of the Saint Emperor Palace who were scattered because of this huge shock wave splattered blood. They screamed and fell to the ground. How could Xue Leihan, who had experienced thousands of battles, let go of such a good opportunity to kill the enemy? The Grand Orient Sword had killed more than 500 people in this short period of time. It was extremely glorious. When Ji Mo, Luo Kedi, and the others saw that the crisis over Mo Qingwu and the other girls had been resolved, they also took this opportunity to rush back and kill. A total of 18 peak experts were like tigers released from their cages, crazily slashing and killing. At this moment, it was no longer a fight between two sides. It was a one-sided massacre. In this chaotic place, there were always experts of the Saint Emperor Palace who fell to the ground silently and died mysteriously, turning into a thread of true spirit. That was the Dark God's attack. Another loud sound rang out, and another mushroom cloud appeared. Chu Yang's calamity sword once again smashed against the mountain and river sword. The mountain and river sword let out a sharp sword cry, which carried a trace of humiliation and unwillingness. The calamity sword's cry filled the sky, as if it was responding. Only the two swords could communicate and feel. The mountain and river sword's humiliation and unwillingness weren't because it was inferior to the calamity sword. It was because of other reasons. Chu Yang only felt that his blood was boiling, and his fighting spirit was surging like never before. An unimaginably thick power was accumulating in his body, and he had no time to release it. Every time he clashed with the mountain and river sword to the limit, he would feel a wave of sobriety and comfort. And after that moment of comfort, it was followed by an even more bloated pain. He shouted, as if he had gone mad. He slashed down one sword after another without any hesitation. There was no strategy at all. He just wanted to force you to fight head-on. Coincidentally, the Saint Monarch was also coincidentally in the same situation. The true spirits of the fallen experts of the Saint Emperor Palace were completely different from the ordinary 10,000 saints' true spirit. And so many of them had died suddenly. So many high-quality true spirits had entered the Saint Emperor's body almost at the same time. Even with the Saint Emperor's cultivation, he couldn't assimilate all of them for his own use. For a moment, he was like Chu Yang. His vital energy was extremely abundant, exceeding the limit that his body could bear. He was also bloated more and more. Chapter 26:38. Otherwise, with the Saint Lord's battle experience, it was impossible for him not to see that Chu Yang was in a very subtle bad state at this moment. Fighting him head-on was the most unwise thing to do. As long as he fought with him, he wouldn't have to fight him head-on. He wouldn't even have to do it himself and he would self-destruct. It was just that the Saint Lord was in the same situation at this moment and also needed a channel to vent. Therefore, Chu Yang's head-on fight was exactly what the Saint Lord wished for. In such a special case situation, the two of them didn't care about the battle situation around them. They were like two mad bulls, only knowing how to collide continuously. In fact, at this moment, the two of them were actually faintly afraid in their hearts. Damn it, please don't let this guy die before I'm done venting. That would be the real problem, and it would be terrible. Therefore, every moment, every sword and every strike of the two of them gathered all the strength they could muster in their body. They intended to vent as much of the strength in their bodies as possible. As for other matters, such as the exposure of the mastermind behind the 10,000 saints' true spirit, or other life and death issues, at this moment, they really couldn't care less. Only by overcoming this life and death crisis would they have the right to talk about other matters. Therefore, they could only collide and collide. Then, they would be repelled, retreat, advance again, and collide again. Just like this, the two of them used the most extreme, most simple, and most barbaric method to launch an extreme collision. This kind of returning to the original battle mode, the surrounding people really couldn't interfere. Once they entered this shattered area, they would feel as if they were struck by lightning. Even super experts like the East Emperor Demon Empress were no exception. The power of the collision between the two of them had actually exceeded the level of the current Heaven Imperial Court. In view of this, Everyone was more than happy to chase and kill the other experts from the Saint Emperor Palace. This time, there were a total of 4,000 to 5,000 experts from the Saint Emperor Palace who came with the Saint Lord. However, when facing these peak experts who were already at the peak of the Heaven Imperial Court, especially when facing such a large group of them at once, there was no way to fight back at all. This sword had blocked Luo Kudi's move with great difficulty. But Jimo's sword had already found a gap, and had pierced into his heart. There was clearly only one Mo Tianji in front of him. However, a viburnum flower behind him had already quietly drilled into his chest. As for the Eastern Emperor Demon Empress, she was like a tiger that had entered a flock of sheep as she unleashed a massacre. Rui Butong's Nirvana flame burned fiercely. His entire person had turned into a huge and divine phoenix, swallowing and spitting out flames as he flew brilliantly in the sky. The only thing that could truly kill the myriad holiness celestial spirit was Rui Butong's Nirvana flame. Even the Eastern Emperor's Grand Orient sword and the Demon Empress Demon King's hook paled in comparison. The archer god's arrows truly lived up to their reputation. His arrows never missed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One life after another was claimed. He was taken away just like that. Chula waved her hands. Her cultivation at the pinnacle of the Saint Realm and her incomparable poison were a perfect combination. She moved around the cruel battlefield as she pleased. Wherever he went, the enemies fell in droves. On the other hand, Mo Qingwu, Zi Xieching, and the rest could only watch the battle. In fact, the four of them were also puzzled. Why did that strange light appear on his body just now? If it was just this strange light, it would have been fine. But why did it condense into a woman that he had never seen before? And the strangest thing was, this woman. Until now, she was still in a light screen and had not disappeared. Facing the messy battlefield, this pitilessly beautiful woman was shrouded in a faint layer of worry. And a kind of gratification that came from the bottom of her heart. This woman's gaze was admiring the vast expanse of greenery around her. Her eyes were full of nostalgia and joy. She was completely dismissive of the battlefield that was filled with war cries. It was as if the order she had just given had nothing to do with her. However, it was this poetic, dreamy, and ethereal woman who casually gave an order that became the fuse that led to the destruction of the Saint Emperor Palace. Boom, boom, boom. As the massacre continued, the number of experts from the Saint Emperor Palace decreased. However, the collision between Chu Yang and the Saint Emperor became more and more intense. The Mountain River Sword was indeed the #1 divine weapon in the Heavenly Imperial Court. It was not at a disadvantage in the continuous collision with the Calamity Sword. It was not inferior at all. The two swords maintained the same flickering light and the same sword aura. There was no sign of damage at all. Both of them seemed to have lost their temper. Neither of them was willing to change their moves. They just kept on colliding and fighting to the death without backing down. Chu Yang, whose eyes had already turned red, did not know that he had been hated by a ruthless character that he could not afford to offend at this moment. At this moment, in a pitch-black space within the Calamity Sword, a figure couldn't help but sway left and right. He constantly muttered angrily, "Motherfucker. Again. Again. I'm going dizzy. These two damned bastards, this is a motherfucking sword. Don't you two bastards understand the principle of a sword being light and agile? This is a sword, not a machete, and not a sledgehammer. Who the hell would do this? They're really unreasonable. I really want to rush out now and beat these two bastards up. They're shaking me to death, shaking me to death. I'm really going to be angry. When will this fucking end? I've really had enough. Chu Yang, you bastard, I'll remember you. Just you wait, you old, you're not done yet, you're colliding again, not to mention how dissatisfied and vengeful the guy with the sword was. Chu Yang and the saint had already collided thousands of times. With the continuous collisions, no matter how fast the energy was replenished, the energy in the body was still not endless. Gradually, both of them vaguely felt that the energy was almost exhausted. They could control the remaining energy freely. Their arms were starting to feel sore and numb, and there seemed to be some strange feelings on their faces. Using his divine sense to check, he realized that his body was bleeding from all 7 orifices due to the continuous collisions. It seemed that he also had some serious internal injuries. It was only because his energy was abundant earlier that the internal injuries were not obvious. Now that his energy was greatly depleted, the injuries were gradually showing. Chu Yang's arms were trembling slightly, and the eyes of the saint opposite him had already started to flicker, because, just a moment ago, he realized that there was no sound around him. Only when he turned his head around did he realize how badly he had lost this time. There were more than 4,700 experts from the Saint Empress Palace, and none of them were still alive. The one with the most serious injuries was the mighty god, one of the 5 gods of the fairy race. He was known for his strength, and he walked the path of defeating 10 with 1 strength. He was the most seriously injured in this battle, and his whole body was covered in blood and flesh. However, he definitely did not suffer any fatal injuries. Fortunately, the fairy race did not have heavy elixirs. Otherwise, with 1 heavy elixir, his injuries would be healed in the blink of an eye, and he would be full of vigor. Seeing this scene, everyone, including the Saint Master Yun, clearly realized one thing: the Saint Empress Palace. It's over. The Saint Master Yun, who had shocked the world for millions of years and was regarded as a god by everyone in the Heaven Imperial Court, would also gradually walk towards the end of his road after this moment. At this moment, the Saint Master was really close to breaking down. Even in his dreams, he would never have thought that he would weave such a perfect lie, drag the elf race into the water with him, and even create such a heaven-sent opportunity to kill Chu Yang. He was prepared to kill Shui Leihan, Demon Empress Chu Yang, and the others with such a meticulous plan. But things had developed so much, and the person who was tricked in the end was actually himself. Moreover, after this incident, the sage himself had realized that he had already been conned by this vicious scheme to the point where he was beyond redemption. Until now, he still hadn't truly understood where he had made a mistake. Why did the situation develop to such a bad state? This feeling almost drove the Saint Master crazy. Even with his cultivation, he was on the verge of collapsing at this moment. Chu Yang was panting, and the Saint Master opposite him was also panting like a cow. But unlike the Saint Master who was on the verge of breaking down, Chu Yang was very happy. Because he had already found a way to fuse the heavy elixir and eliminate the extreme backlash. And at this moment, Chu Yang's heart was filled with an indescribable excitement. Once upon a time, the only Saint Master who was above Die and the Empress was so unattainable, so unreachable. But now, he was facing the Saint Master head-on with his own strength, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. Although he had 15 super heavy elixirs, the Saint Master also had close to 5,000 high-level 10,000 Saints True Spirits to supplement him. In terms of the current situation, this battle was more or less evenly matched. Even the resources on the Saint Master's side were still at a considerable advantage. Shui Leihan stared at Chu Yang, who was standing with his sword in a daze. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh. From now on, the Heaven Imperial Court has once again a true, unparalleled expert. The Demon Empress sighed softly and said with certainty, "That's right. From today onwards, the history of the Heaven Imperial Court is about to be rewritten and enter a new era. And the source of all this is actually, because of these few little ones." Both of them were somewhat emotional. Before this, or when they had just met Chu Yang and the others, who would have thought that they would actually grow to such an extent in such a short period of time? Mo Tianji, Xie Danqiong, Shui Leihan, the Demon Empress, Chu Yang, Ji Mo, Luo Kedi, and the rest, as well as the 5 fairy gods, were all staring at Cloudmaster fiercely. On the other hand, Cloudmaster's side was completely and truly alone. So many peak-level masters surrounded Cloud Lord. Chapter 2639. But Cloudmaster's expression didn't change. After that moment of near collapse, the saint had more than 1,000,000 years of experience after all. He instantly adapted to the terrible situation in front of him. The determination of his state of mind was evident. He panted lightly and looked around at the people around him. There was an abnormal flush on his face. He actually laughed and said, "Do you people think that I'm at the end of my rope now and will definitely lose. That I'm definitely going to die. His smile was still as relaxed as ever. Shui Leihan said lightly, we've never dared to underestimate a saint. No one dared to underestimate a saint. Even if the situation was good, who knew if the saint didn't have other trump cards? Since the saint could have 2 trump cards, the 10,000 saints' true spirit and his doppelganger, would he have a third trump card that no one knew about? Even if he died today, he could use his doppelganger to revive himself and rise again. Who would dare to underestimate such a person? Chu Yang also laughed. Before you're completely finished, no one will dare to underestimate you. But even if you don't die today, you'll have to peel off a layer of your skin here. We're quite confident about this. The saint sneered. Peel off a layer of my skin? I'm afraid you people aren't qualified enough. Then let's wait and see. Chu Yang sneered. His eyes flashed with undisguised killing intent. Shui Leihan looked at the saint seriously. Suddenly, he took a step forward slowly and said, Cloud Master, you're at the end of your rope today. In the future, you won't have any right to deceive the world. I want to ask you something. You shouldn't be hiding anything. And since we're acquainted, I have to ask this question. If you don't understand, you'll always be loyal. Cloud Master said indifferently, I know what you want to ask. Back then, I was the one who suggested gathering everyone to hunt down the 10,000 saints' true devil. But before we did, I already knew that secret. So, do you understand now? What Shui Leihan wanted to ask was precisely this. And when Shui Leihan opened his mouth, Cloud Master also guessed that Dong Huang was going to ask about this. Now that everything was out in the open, there was no point in denying it anymore. The saint who had always deceived the world with his lies. Today, he finally spoke the truth for the first time. Because he also knew that if he missed this day, he would have died. There was no chance for him to say anything more. Especially. At this moment, Dong Huang and the others were still qualified. As expected, when the 10,000 saints' true devil was besieged by everyone had always been on guard against the great devil masters coming to help. But in the end, not a single one of them appeared. You're saying that you've already killed all of them? Shui Leihan gritted his teeth. So you've long subdued that person? Master Cloud laughed. Shui Leihan. Your words are laughable and superfluous. If I didn't capture those people, how could I rebuild the 10,000 saints' true spirit base? This kind of thing. In the end, it's best to have someone familiar with the task. Shui Leihan nodded and said, no one has ever known about your master's background. But now that I think about it, since you were able to successfully subdue the great devil and rebuild the 10,000 saints' real spirit base with such ease, you must be the younger brother of that 10,000 saints' real devil from back then, right? The reason why you proposed to gather everyone's strength to eliminate the myriad saints' true devil was because you didn't want anyone to compete with you, even if that person was your teacher. Isn't that right? Master Cloud laughed loudly, but there was a hint of mockery in his voice. Shui Leihan, your brain is indeed very good, to be able to think of this in such a short time. But let me tell you, you're wrong. There's a fundamental blind spot in your thinking. Wrong? Blind spot? Shui Leihan couldn't help but be stunned. He frowned and said, please enlighten me. In his mind, after deducing bit by bit back then to come to such a conclusion, his confidence should not be wrong. But, it was actually wrong. Did he still have a blind spot? A mocking and vicious smile appeared on Master Cloud's face. He pointed at Shui Leihan and said mockingly, you bunch of so-called righteous people, ha ha ha. The reason why you can succeed in today's battle is really because the heavens are blind. It's because you're as stupid as pigs and don't know what means are at all. Shui Leihan frowned. Suddenly, a thought flashed across his mind. He said in realization, could it be that you're actually, Master Cloud sneered. If I'm only the disciple of the myriad saints' true devil, how would he let me go? He would definitely have refined me into the myriad saints' true spirit long ago. You can't even think of this, and you still want to be the Eastern Demon Empress. What a joke. Shui Leihan's eyes were cold. He sighed and said, I see. Master Cloud, you're really worse than pigs and dogs. Ji Mo, who was at the side, asked in puzzlement, What do you mean by I see? Mo Tianji pulled him from behind and stopped him from continuing. Mo Tianji's understanding was even before the Eastern Emperor's, but his reminder at this time was equivalent to confirming and mocking the Eastern Emperor's prestige and dignity. Xue Leihan smiled bitterly and shook his head. With a kind of disdain from the bottom of his heart, he said in a low voice, Master Cloud is not the disciple of the Myriad Saints' true devil, but the son of the Myriad Saints' true devil, his biological son. Everyone was greatly shocked. They looked at Master Cloud, almost in disbelief. Back then, Master Cloud mobilized the entire world's power just to kill his own father. This was too inconceivable. There was actually such a despicable and heartless person in this world. Master Cloud laughed loudly, rocking back and forth. He said, Not bad, not bad. At least you're not completely stupid. I was the son of the Myriad Saints' true devil back then, and it's precisely because I was his son that he couldn't possibly cultivate me into the Myriad Saints' true spirit. And only through his son would I know all the methods to cultivate the Myriad Saints' true spirit. And only through his son would I be able to subdue all the great devil masters. His expression suddenly became violent and ferocious. All of you know now? Shocking, right? Ha 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 ha. What a pity, all of you are already too late by more than 1,000,000 years. For these more than 1,000,000 years, all of you have been like a bunch of stupid pigs, toyed by me in the palm of my hand. Ha ha ha. Just thinking about it makes me feel very satisfied. He laughed loudly. All of you have spent so much effort to get rid of the Myriad Saints' true devil, but all of you have become the subordinates of the Myriad Saints' true devil. Ha ha ha. Don't you think it's funny? Don't you think it's ironic? A bunch of idiots. The demon empress laughed coldly. Ironic? Funny? Idiots? What we find funny is still only you. As a son, you actually gathered so many experts, plotted and schemed, cut off all reinforcements, and used all sorts of methods to kill your own biological father. Cloudmaster, are you still a human? Cloudmaster laughed crazily. Why not? With him around, I will never be able to truly grasp all the secrets, much less control all the powers. Even if he really rules over the Heaven Imperial Court, I will at most be a tie, or even a one-tie. What's the point of having such a status? Furthermore, he doesn't even have the ambition to rule over the entire Heaven Imperial Court. All he wants is his own strength. How stupid is that? What's the point of having such a strong force and such a stupid thought when he dies? More importantly, I started to clear my name from the moment I started. At that time, I was already going to become the #1 person in the Heaven Imperial Court, but the only stain on my name is that I am the son of the Myriad Saints' true devil. Although no one knows this secret, it is still like a thorn in my back, a bone in my throat. I am always worried that he will ask me to do something. And if I don't do it, he will expose my identity at any time. I am Cloudmaster. I am the Cloudmaster. How can I be suppressed like this? What do you know about this feeling of having your biggest secret suppressed by someone else? What do you know? Cloudmaster roared with grief and indignation. If I don't kill him, what can I do? If I kill him, I can gain a good reputation and become the #1 hero in the entire Heaven Imperial Court. Why can't I do something like this that will only bring me benefits and no harm? He is so evil. If I kill him, won't I be upholding justice? Why can't I kill him? And if I kill him, I can subdue the great devil master and have the secret of the Myriad Saints' true spirit. Why can't I kill him? He is my father. He gave birth to me, raised me, and cultivated me. In the end, he sacrificed himself for my great cause. What's wrong with that? Isn't this the right thing to do? Which father in the world doesn't sacrifice himself for his son? Why can't he? Why? Everyone looked at Cloudmaster as if they were looking at a pile of shit. Their eyes were full of undisguised disgust and disdain. Before this, no one would have thought that there would be such a person in this world. So inhumane. He was so heartless. So infuriating. Killing one's own father was actually said to bring benefits and no harm. This kind of shameless argument made everyone explode in anger in an instant. Chu Yang said sternly, even if he is evil and heartless and can kill anyone in the world, you, Cloudmaster, can't be killed. Because you are his son. Indeed, every father in the world is sacrificing himself for his son. But this doesn't mean that the son has no conscience. It also doesn't mean that the son has no conscience. Not to mention killing him. Cloudmaster, you are worse than a dog. Mo Tianji was so angry that his face turned red. It is myriad saints' true devil's misfortune to have a son like you. Xue Leihan sighed and said, perhaps, this is myriad saints' true devil's retribution for all the evil he has done in his life. To die in the hands of his own son. If I don't kill him, can he live on? Don't you all still want to kill him? He has done so many evil things and yet he is so high profile. He will die sooner or later. Rather than die in your hands, I would rather he die in my hand. At least, he can still make some contributions to his own son. Cloudmaster gritted his teeth. Xue Leihan, stop pretending. You are the real executioner. Chapter 2640. I killed my father. Do you feel good about it? Ha ha ha. Cloudmaster said despicably, I'm not afraid to tell you that I actually feel very good too. He brought me to this world, and I sent him away from this world. Isn't this the best repayment? Isn't this me sending him off in his old age? The demon empress turned her head away in disgust. Everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The words sending him off in his old age could actually be interpreted in such a way. This world was really big. There were weirdos every year, but not as many as this year. Faced with such shameless words, and coming from the mouth of Cloudmaster, the saint who had been the most powerful person in the world for 1,000,000 years, everyone felt especially intolerable. You even dared to kill your own father. You were even willing to kill him. And you did it without any guilt at all. Xue Leihan's eyes were filled with deep sorrow. He said softly, then it's no wonder that you would kill your own father-in-law and swallow the assets of someone who had done you a great favor. Sigh. Cloudmaster, you're really a piece of trash, a complete piece of trash. Cloudmaster frowned and said angrily, what are you saying? Xue Leihan's eyes were cold. He said, I'm saying, you're a complete piece of trash. Cloud Lord chuckled. Trash? In this world, who isn't trash? Cloudmaster looked up and laughed. Who didn't grow up from a piece of trash? For example, you and Chu Yang. In the beginning, weren't you just a piece of trash? Or rather, an ant. But even though you've grown until now, you're still trash. In this lifetime, you'll always be trash. Xue Leihan's lips were a little green. At this moment, Xue Leihan thought of his Xue clan. It was all because of this person in front of him. Disintegrated. But this person was actually such a despicable person. His father, brothers, family, little sister. Their lives were all ruined by this person. The anger in Xue Leihan's heart at this moment was really incomparable. Suddenly, a sword light flashed. Cloudmaster. Today, you and I will fight to the death. Cloudmaster dodged, tilting his head and smiling. You seem to hate me a lot. Why? Did I kill your whole family and rape your sister? Xue Leihan. I don't understand. You've always been against me. What enmity do I have with you? Xue Leihan's eyes widened, his chest heaving up and down. But he still said, let me ask you. What exactly happened to the purple cloud heavens back then? Cloudmaster laughed loudly. Don't you know the reason? You were there many times back then. Zihao threatened me so many times back then. That bastard, am I someone he can threaten? How dare you threaten me to not enter the Xue clan? How dare you threaten me not to marry Xue Xiana? He actually threatened to kill me. Ha ha ha. Can he kill me? In the end, didn't I kill him? He laughed complacently. I've used a little trick and I've made that bastard Zihao die an unnatural death. He died with everlasting regret. He looked up to the sky and howled, in the Heaven Imperial Court. No one can threaten me. No. There wasn't one in the past, and there wouldn't be one in the future. You, Xue Leihan. You, Yaroshin you, Chu Yang, all of you, and all of you will die. Not a single one of them can live. He looked up to the sky and roared, as if he had gone mad. The look in his eyes became ruthless and violent, flashing with a faint black light. But he was obviously laughing happily. Yes, he didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt for everything he had done. There was only joy. Shui Leihan calmed down at once. You've used a little trick. The saint panted heavily and laughed strangely. That's right. Back then, your cultivation had already reached a bottleneck and couldn't break through for a long time. Then, didn't you get a firmament technique? That secret manual is good stuff. It's your opportunity to break through the bottleneck, right? Then, you went into seclusion. And you couldn't come out even after you went into seclusion. Even if I forcefully interrupted you, it's impossible, right? Ha ha ha. Shui Leihan felt cold all over. You, the saint laughed wildly, rocking back and forth. That secret manual was given to you by me. The restriction inside was also set up by me. Ha ha ha. Shui Leihan, do you really think you've discovered an ancient relic? Do you really think you're so lucky? Ha ha ha. What a joke. The Great East Sovereign. Ha 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 ha. Shui Leihan's face was ashen. So, that seclusion he went into seclusion back then was a scheme of the saint. After you got the firmament technique, I immediately informed the extraterrestrial demons. Zi Xiaotian and Zi Hao completely lost the help of the outside world. The saint, Venerable Master Yun, no longer had any scruples and said everything. These were obviously the things he was proud of in his life and had always been buried in his heart. He had long felt that he was going to go crazy from holding it in. He actually didn't share such a proud thing with anyone. Wasn't that casting pearls before swine? Walking in the dark. Now that all his identities and secrets had been exposed, there was no point in hiding them anymore. Moreover, after today, he, the only saint, would probably become a rat despised by everyone in the heavenly imperial court. By then, there wouldn't be a chance to say anything anymore. He might as well say it all out today. No matter what, he could still be happy. To let others know about his proud things, especially to see their regretful expressions, was what the saint looked forward to the most. As expected, he wasn't disappointed. I told the extraterrestrial demons that Zi Xiaotian already had no roots. He. Moreover, this was the most suitable place for them. If they succeeded, the other heavens and earth in the heavenly imperial court wouldn't join forces to encircle and annihilate them. Those extraterrestrial demons indeed sent troops to invade Zi Xiaotian. Venerable Master Yun's face, which had always been calm and peaceful, was now filled with extreme evil, insidious and poisonous. Then, during the war, I personally rushed to Zi Xiaotian and told Zi Hao an important piece of information. The extraterrestrial demons invaded this time because they wanted to fight a decisive battle and dominate the entire heavenly imperial court. Our heavenly imperial court was actively preparing for war. Once the time was right, we would launch a decisive battle with the extraterrestrial demons. But, before the time was right, we needed Zi Hao to hold on. The saint's words made everyone sigh. With Zi Hao's heroic spirit, how could he take a step back after knowing such a thing? He was destined to hold on until the last moment. But when he finally understood that all this was the saint's scheme, everything was too late. Even if he wanted to retreat, it was already too late. Because there were already so many brothers who had died in the battle at Purple Cloud Heavens, only because he believed the words of a villain. Even if he had the ability to escape, he would definitely not stay out of it. Therefore, the tragedy of the Purple Cloud Heavenly Emperor was destined just like that. At that time, it was already impossible to change. There were provisions for the internal affairs and no reinforcements for the external affairs. During that period of time, all the big worlds were in chaos, to the extent that the people had no way of making a living. Did you think that those were all coincidences? Ha ha ha. Those were all caused by me. Zi Hao is indeed amazing. The saint chuckled. I originally thought that it would take at most a year's time for the entire Purple Cloud Heavens to fall. But I didn't expect that Zi Hao actually held on for as long as a year. Just a little bit more and he could hold on until you, Shui Leihan, came out of seclusion. But in the end, you still didn't come out in time. The saint laughed maniacally. Aren't you sworn brothers with Zihao? Aren't you good brothers who entrusted their lives to each other? Why didn't you appear when your brothers died? Xueleihan, ha 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 ha. Even if you hate me, what can you do? For these 1,000,000 years, you wanted to kill me every moment, but did you manage to do it? Perhaps today is the closest you've ever been to your goal, but you only managed to do it by relying on the help of many outsiders. Is this your ability? You remember your brother's revenge, but you're destined to never be able to avenge them. You'll never be able to avenge them. The saint's maniacal laughter was like sharp awls piercing into Xueleihan's heart. My brother's revenge. No revenge for 1,000,000 years. Only now did the truth come to light. Xueleihan looked at Zi Sheqing with a gaze full of guilt. The saint's gaze also followed and looked over. He couldn't understand why Xueleihan would look at this young girl with such guilt. Zi Sheqing said proudly, Uncle Xue, you don't have to blame yourself. My father died protecting purple cloud heavens. That was his territory in the first place, where his responsibility lay. I can feel that my father still had no regrets in that great battle until his death. For the sake of purple cloud heavens, he was worth it. As for Uncle Xue not being able to go because you were tricked, you can only blame Cloud Lord for being too despicable. The main culprit is Cloud Lord, only a despicable person like him. This piece of trash has nothing to do with Uncle Xue. The brotherhood between Uncle Xue and my father is clear as day. No one can change it, Zi Sheqing said resolutely. Xueleihan's beard trembled. For a moment, he actually felt hot in his heart, almost glistening with tears. The saint was suddenly tongue-tied. He looked at Zi Sheqing as if he had seen a ghost. You're actually Zihao's daughter? In that instant, he felt his mind go blank. He really didn't expect that the heavenly emperor of purple cloud heavens, Zihao, actually left behind a daughter when the entire army of purple cloud heavens was wiped out. I'll let you know. The demon empress stared at Cloud Lord with extreme disgust. This child in front of you is the daughter of the heavenly emperor of purple cloud Zihao and sister Ling Piaoping. She's also the only direct descendant of the heavenly emperor of purple cloud left in this world. Heaven always blesses kind people, but it definitely won't bless a beast like you. Back then, you caused the destruction of the heavenly emperor of purple cloud's family. Now, the daughter of the heavenly emperor of purple cloud has personally witnessed your fall from grace. This can be considered as karma, the demon empress said coldly. This also proves that Cloud Lord, your path has come to an end. Today, it's time for you to repay the blood debt. Cloud Lord, surrender yourself. I always thought that the 1st of August would be the gathering of comrades. I didn't expect that the few of us would set the gathering to be today. I was scolded just now. I'll go quickly. I'll come back tonight and write my story according to the situation. Chapter 2641. Master Yun's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Zi Sheqing. Suddenly, the look in his eyes slowly changed from shock and disbelief to viciousness and malevolence. So, Zihao actually still has a bastard child left in this world. Forget it, let me end his life completely today and let him live in regret in the afterlife. The demon empress Dong Huang and all his brothers stepped forward at the same time. The 5 fairy gods' eyes also turned sharp instantly. Now, the illusion of the fairy empress was related to the white light on Zi Sheqing. This bastard actually wanted to destroy Zi Sheqing? Wasn't this equivalent to destroying the last trace of the fairy empress? They had to kill him even if they had to risk their lives. The archer god's bow was fully drawn. This arrow was different from all the previous ones. The archer god had even fused his life and soul into the arrow. This was an arrow that risked his life. In front of me, who dares to hurt my baby, my Qiong Xiao? The dark god's figure disappeared again. Obviously, he had returned to the darkness and was ready to launch a fatal attack. At this moment, all 5 of the elven gods were bristling with rage. As long as the Cloud Master dared to move, they would dare to risk their lives. Cloudmaster, you're courting death. Chuyang snorted coldly. Are you worthy? Kill. The Cloudmaster suddenly jumped up. With a shake of his body, he and his sword turned into thousands of rays of light and rushed towards Zixieqing. Break. The archer god shouted and spat out a mouthful of blood. He had launched his ultimate arrow. The moonlight in the sky followed the release of this arrow. It suddenly shone brightly. Puff 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 puff. The archer god's arrow pierced through the countless illusions and rays of light created by the saint. The next moment, the saint shouted. His body, which was moving at full speed, suddenly flashed and twisted. He actually appeared in the sky far away. There was a transparent hole on his shoulder. The archer god's arrow actually injured his actual body in the almost endless illusions. This was something that was almost impossible to do. Yet, the fairy archer god did it. The archer god spat out blood and lay on the ground. He could no longer move. But his arrow that risked his life. However, he had already severely injured Cloudmaster. Almost at the same time, Shueleihan's Grand Orient sword flew up like a rainbow. Chuyang's Calamity sword also turned into a ray of flowing light. The Demon Empress Demon King hook also scattered demonic aura all over the sky. Xiedanqiong's jasper flower heaven suddenly bloomed. Rui Butong's nirvana flame burned the world. Mo Tianji's purple jade flute covered the sky and covered the earth. Ji Mo and Luo Kedi became one with their swords. Everyone attacked with all their might. Another illusory figure appeared beside the sage. It was the elf dark god who was attacking with all his might. As for the other three fairy gods, they turned into three streams of light and charged forward. All the experts reappeared at the same time as the Cloud Lord's arrow. Launch a counterattack. There was only one goal. The only holy monarch, Cloud Lord. Cloud Lord attacked Zixieqing. This was tantamount to crossing everyone's bottom line. No matter who he attacked, he might not be able to create such an effect. But his target was Zixieqing. In fact, Cloud Lord didn't expect that Zixieqing was closely related to everyone present at this moment. The purple cloud Heavenly Emperor's daughter that he wanted to kill was now the incarnation of the Fairy Empress, Chuyang's wife, Tribulation's sister-in-law, and the East Emperor Demon Empress niece. Once he moved, the East Emperor Demon Empress, the Elf race, and Tribulation's brothers all started to fight with all their might. The sage who was surrounded by countless attacks frantically dodged, counterattacked, and escaped. But in this short period of time, he had been attacked by so many experts at the same time. How could he not be flustered? In this world, he believed that there was no one who could block so many attacks at the same time in an orderly manner. At least, only the sage, Cloud Lord, couldn't. With such attacks, not to mention one Cloud Lord, even if there were two more Cloud Lords, they would definitely not be able to block it. This time, it was as if Cloud Lord had provoked the craziest hornet's nest in this world. Even though he was the #1 expert in the world, he was still in a very sorry state. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Cloud Lord howled miserably at the sky. Amidst the frenzied parries, dodges, and chaotic movements, Ji-Mo let out a cry of agony and was the first to be sent flying. He coughed up a mouthful of blood, but his sword had already been left on Guru Yun's body. Luo Kedi and Ji-Mo both coughed up blood and retreated at almost the same time. Luo Kedi's sword was still in his hand, but before he retreated, he left behind a gaping wound that was half a foot long on the great sage's body, so deep that his bones could be seen. The East Emperor watched the battle and looked for a chance to enter. Without any hesitation, he clashed with Cloud Lord's palm. Both of them spat out blood at the same time and leaned back. Xiedanqiong's viburnum flower took the opportunity to bloom on Cloud Lord's back. The viburnum flower emperor retreated after she succeeded. She wasn't greedy and didn't suffer any counterattacks. There was also a strange snake-shaped weapon that pierced through Cloud Lord's thigh. However, the owner of the snake-shaped weapon, the dark deity, wasn't as lucky as Xiedanqiong. He took a kick and was sent flying. The Demon King's hook forced the mountain and river sword away. The Demon Empress' snow-white palms struck out and smashed onto Cloud Lord's chest like a huge hammer. Cloud Lord suffered another heavy blow. He screamed and retreated desperately. He borrowed the force of the attack and tried to break free from the Demon Empress attacks. However, the group of people in the air didn't want to let up. They entangled with each other and rolled out for thousands of feet in an instant. Chu Yang's calamity sword finally found an opportunity. With one strike, it chopped off one of Cloud Lord's shoulders. However, the moment that arm fell off, it swayed in the wind and turned into another Cloud Lord. His face was the same as before. He pounced forward fiercely and used his body to block the calamity sword. Such a strange technique was truly shocking. After a part of the body left the body, it could turn into his own appearance to block the calamity. This was undoubtedly another trump card of the Saint Lord. Chu Yang didn't slow down or hesitate. He swung the calamity sword no less than 1,000 times. The devouring power was also activated at the same time. Fortunately, the Cloud Lord formed by the arm looked exactly the same as Cloud Lord. The power that it could unleash wasn't high. Not only was it far inferior to Cloud Lord himself, but it couldn't even compare to the clone. Chu Yang attacked fiercely with the calamity sword. With the help of the devouring power, this clone was cut into pieces in an instant. Chu Yang was afraid that there would be more trouble in the future. He poured a lot of energy into the calamity sword, and the sword energy became even more intense. He vaporized all the fragments and turned them into nothingness. He didn't expect to hit the jackpot. This vaporized state was even more beneficial for the devouring power of the calamity sword. It devoured the Saint Lord's severed arm and replenished a lot of energy. It greatly replenished Chu Yang's energy that was about to be depleted. Mo Tianji's purple jade flute turned into a purple ocean. Finally, he tapped Cloud Lord's forehead with the flute. A bloody hole immediately appeared on Cloud Lord's forehead. It was a shocking sight. Mo Tianji rarely attacked, but when he did, he would definitely succeed. This was especially so at this moment. However, while he succeeded, Cloud Lord's counterattack was also fierce. His remaining arm struck Mo Tianji's chest 3 times in a row. However, the moment Mo Tianji retreated, blood spurted out of his mouth. Cloud Lord's right eye had already been blinded by the purple jade flute. The arrow god shot another arrow, and it pierced through Cloud Lord's back. This arrow was the arrow god's soul-chasing arrow. It was extremely vicious and deadly. Cloud Lord attacked fiercely again. He suddenly roared, and his broken body suddenly exploded. He cried out in extreme pain, "I will definitely take revenge for today." Before he finished speaking, there was a sudden boom. His entire body turned into smoke that filled the sky. The smoke billowed all the way to the north. Chu Yang's calamity sword, Shui Leihan's Grand Orient sword, the Demon Empress's Demon King hook, and Xie Danqiong's viburnum flower all shot into the sky at the same time. They tried their best to surround and suppress the smoke that filled the sky. The 4 experts started to wipe out the smoke together. At this moment, another streak of red light flew over like lightning. It was Mo Qingwu's Qing Wu Dream Saber. However, there seemed to be other colors on the Qing Wu Dream Saber this time. It was Chu Le-Er's poison that attacked together with Mo Qingwu's saber. The 5 divine weapons unleashed their own characteristics at the same time, and the smoke dissipated instantly. A scream seemed to come from the depths of one's soul. In the next moment, a strong wind rose from the ground, and a streak of smoke shot into the sky. Then, with a boom, it turned into air. However, the calamity sword still flew into the sky, relentlessly chasing after it. Smack! A streak of light fell from the sky. An extremely furious shout came from the void. It was Cloud Lord's voice. The clouds in the sky dissipated in all directions. The wind swept away the clouds, leaving no trace. Cloud Lord's body disappeared just like that. Only one streak of light fell straight from the sky. With a clang, it landed on a huge rock. The huge rock couldn't withstand the heavy blow and instantly shattered. It was a sword that fell from the sky. Apart from shattering the rock, it was still stuck in the ground shakily. Although only half of it was exposed, it was still shining brightly. It was the weapon that I, Cloud Lord, had never let go of in my life. The Mountain River Sword. The #1 divine weapon in the Imperial Court. This sword was also the only divine weapon that could collide with the Calamity Sword and remain unscathed. The #1 divine weapon in the Imperial Court lived up to its name. This battle had actually caused Master Cloud's personal weapon to be lost here. Looking at this sword, Shui Leihan and the Demon Empress both had complicated expressions. Besides being the #1 divine weapon in the Imperial Court, this sword was also the symbol of supreme power in the Imperial Court. The Mountain River Sword. It represented loyalty, the Imperial Court, the mountains and rivers, and the human heart. However, such a divine weapon, which was supposed to be the embodiment of justice and justice, had fallen into the hands of people like Master Cloud for over 1,000,000 years. This is the Mountain River Sword? Jimo walked over curiously. The #1 weapon in the Imperial Court? Don't touch this sword. Shui Leihan hurriedly reminded him. Before he finished speaking, the Mountain and River Sword shook violently. Then, a cloud of snow-white smoke flowed out from the sword. A desolate voice that seemed to be filled with endless sorrow and disappointment sighed, Yu Zhuxie has been oppressed for too long. How can he still have the face to exist in this world? Chapter 2642. Then, the smoke suddenly dispersed, turning into thousands of thin wisps of smoke and dissipating in the air. Pa 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 pa, just like that, the Mountain and River Sword swayed, but starting from the hilt, it started to crack inch by inch. Gradually, this #1 divine sword that had shaken the heavens and symbolized supreme power for millions of years turned into fine powder just like that. A pile of metal scraps. That sigh seemed to sound in everyone's hearts. The moment the Mountain and River Sword shattered, Shui Leihan and the others clearly felt a sense of guilt from the Mountain and River Sword itself. The heroic spirits that had existed in the Mountain and River Sword for millions of years finally dissipated. They were very guilty and very angry. As the symbol of justice, the representative of justice, as the supreme existence, they were used by such a despicable and shameless person for so long. With this thought, these heroic spirits would rather destroy themselves and not return to the world. To thank the world. From now on, there will be no supreme symbol of power in the world anymore. There will be no more Mountain and River Sword. A desolate voice sounded faintly. Then, the sound of wind suddenly rose. Everyone only felt their vision clear up. The Mountain and River Sword was destroyed, and the heroic spirit of the sword also destroyed itself out of shame and regret, dissipating from the world. The East Emperor and the Demon Empress had deep gazes. Both of them bowed deeply at the same time, bidding farewell to the heroic spirit. At the same time, they let out a long sigh. Mo Tianji muttered, "From now on, there will be no more supreme symbol of power in the world, no more Mountain and River Sword." He seemed to have understood something. He said softly, "If there really is no such power in the world, if there really is no such symbol. For the Celestial Imperial Court, this might not be a bad thing, right?" Everyone fell silent upon hearing this. Regarding this question, no one could say for sure. But their hearts. They all felt a heartfelt sense of pity. Divine weapons had spirits and also self-esteem. He was unwilling to be controlled by others, and even more unwilling to be used by bad people for so long. In order to prove his innocence, in order to prove something, he was determined to destroy himself. A sword was already like this. Where was he? But no matter what. After this battle, Cloud Master's vitality was undoubtedly greatly damaged. His physical body was almost completely destroyed. And this time, it was his main body that was injured. The injuries that originated from the body were definitely not something that could be healed in a short period of time. And his divine weapon, the Mountain River Sword, was no longer in his hands. This was equivalent to reducing his strength. Once again, it was greatly weakened. If he were to encounter it again in the future, the danger would definitely be reduced by a lot, right? Thinking of this, everyone was more or less relieved. Immediately send a message to the world and announce to the heavenly imperial court that only our sage monarch, Master Yun, will be witnessed by the Eastern sovereign, the demon empress, Emperor Mo, and the 5 gods of the elf race. They will confirm that he is the master behind the myriad holy true spirit. As for his identity, he is the son of the previous generations. Myriad saints true devil. The demon empress immediately thought of this and said, when facing such an evil person, the demon empress will not be able to escape. Everyone in the entire heaven imperial court has the right to punish him. Not bad. Shui Leihan immediately came to a realization. He looked at Xie Danqiong and said, this time, other than the people here, we also need to announce to the world at the same time that we're removing the title of the saint. The demon empress looked at Mo Tianji. Mo Tianji rubbed his nose and said with a smile, I can guarantee that all 10 worlds will know about this news at the same time. Furthermore, I can guarantee that before Master Yun continues to confuse right and wrong, even if he tries to quibble, it'll be useless. Oh! The demon empress was a little surprised. After the archer god pointed out that Master Yun is the myriad holy true spirit and confirmed the evidence. I've already spread this news. At this moment, it might have already spread to the various branches of the intelligence department. Mo Tianji smiled and said, therefore, I believe that before Master Yun reaches home, he will realize that he's no longer the number 1 person in Heaven Imperial Court. He's just a rat crossing the street and has no chance to fight back. Shui Leihan and the Demon Empress were both stunned. You spread the news before the battle ended. Of course, I had to spread the news as soon as possible. Mo Tianji said, I think the Tianji Intelligence Department, which is closer to this place, has already started to announce this to the world. In another 6 hours at most, there won't be any major force in the entire Imperial Court that doesn't know about this matter, including the Purple Cloud Heaven. The muscles on Shui Leihan's face twitched. This guy is really ruthless. Furthermore, I also vaguely reminded that the entire world should boycott the Holy Emperor Palace. There are rumors that any forces that don't boycott the Holy Emperor Palace may be his subordinate forces. Mo Tianji grinned and said, therefore, I reckon that at this moment, many of the branches of the Holy Emperor Palace should have already been smashed into pieces. The closer the original forces of the Holy Emperor Palace are to this place, the faster they'll be destroyed. The corners of the Demon Empress' eyes also twitched. This guy Mo Tianji is really very dangerous. He's always done everything in advance. There's no need for anyone to say anything. Everything is under his control. Everything is perfect and flawless. When Shui Leihan raised his head, he realized that the 5 elven gods were no longer beside him. Chu Yang was also rushing back. On the battlefield just now, the 4 rays of light were still shining. Everyone's heart skipped a beat and they all rushed back. They saw that the battlefield had already been cleaned up by the 5 elven gods. So many corpses and blood that flowed like a river just now were nowhere to be seen. Even, the whole place was already filled with fresh flowers, like a sea of flowers. Mo Qingwu and the other 3 girls were standing in the center. In mid-air, the figure of the Elven Empress was still there. She looked at the southern sky forest with a gaze full of longing and reluctance, as if she was full of endless emotions. Qiong Xiao. The archer god's voice was trembling. You're finally willing to come back and take a look. The Elven Empress' eyes were actually a little dazed at this moment. Because everyone was looking at her, including Chu Yang. No one dared to be sure. Was this Elven Empress who suddenly appeared just a projection of her divine soul without consciousness? Or was it a barely remaining divine soul doppelganger? The Elven Empress turned her head and locked her gaze on Chu Yang's face. All of a sudden, a smile like a spring flower appeared on her face. The Elven Emperor's seal on Chu Yang's forehead jumped again and gradually appeared. When the Elven Emperor's seal appeared, the Elven Empress' eyes became lively. Her body also became more solid. I'm sorry. Grandpa Archer God. The Elven Empress bowed slightly to the Archer God. Sob sob sob. The Archer God of the Elven race, whose name shook the world. At this moment, he actually burst into tears. Qiong Xiao. You've been away for so many years, and the first thing you say to me after you come back is I'm sorry. The elven empress' eyes glistened with tears. They were glistening. Grandpa Archer God, I don't have much time left. I want to say as much as I can. My current form may seem like a physical body. In fact, it's just a trace of consciousness that I left behind back then. I'm going to leave after saying what I want to say. The elven empress' voice was so weak that it made people want to comfort her involuntarily. The archer god sobbed and stopped asking. The others were also very curious. What exactly was going on? Fortunately, the elven empress didn't have any requests to listen. When she saw everyone gather around, she didn't express any objections. So everyone listened together. Back then, I comprehended the laws of the elves. The elven empress began to speak softly. Everyone was listening attentively. When I was halfway through comprehending, I suddenly felt a little dispirited. The elven empress smiled bitterly. I realized that, although I'm an elf and the elven empress, I'm still a woman after all. So, I wanted to find a home that belonged to me, and that beautiful dream. So, I took the divine book of the elves and left the elven forest to come to the human world. However, I looked around and saw all the heroes in the world, but none of them caught my eye. The elven empress nodded apologetically at Xue Leihan. Her gaze was full of apology, obviously saying that Dong Huang, you're already very outstanding, but I didn't take a fancy to you. It's really not that you're not good enough, it's just that you didn't meet my expectations. Xue Leihan touched his nose very, very awkwardly. You're really too polite. You didn't take a fancy to me. Are you embarrassed? But when I nodded, why did I suddenly feel like I've become trash? Do you know how much helplessness I've endured? You've saved me a lot of trouble. Finally, one day, when I was comprehending the divine book of the elves in the land of thunder and rain, it seemed like a voice suddenly said something to me. There was an incomprehensible confusion on the elven empress' delicate little face. This voice said, Cheong Xiao can't dance with the wind and clouds, the world of pride is in the heavens, the path of purity in this life is clear, and there will be a good marriage in the next life. The elven empress said, these 4 sentences have a mysterious origin. I never understood it, so I kept thinking about it. Then, I finally understood. Cheong Xiao can't dance with the wind and clouds. Yes, I'm Cheong Xiao, but I can't dance with the wind and clouds because the wind and clouds are on me. So, someone needs to dance with the wind and clouds above the Cheong Xiao. And this is a human, not an elf. The world of pride is in the heavens. I once thought, is the heavens the short name of the heavens? But I didn't get anything until later. I accidentally learned from Dong Huang. There's actually another world in this world called the Heavens Continent. So that's the so-called heavens. The elven empress bowed to Xue Leihan. She was grateful for his guidance. But the god of archery and the other 5 elven gods looked at Xue Leihan fiercely as if they wanted to swallow him whole. Xue Leihan swallowed his saliva and thought, when did I tell you about the Heavens Continent? No matter how he thought about it, he still couldn't remember. The 3rd sentence, the path of purity in this life, meant that I'm destined to be lonely in this life, right? The elven empress looked at Zi Sheqing and the others with yearning and envy in her eyes. She said, but the 4th sentence pushed the good marriage to the next life. Chapter 2643. No, no, no. I searched all the way and left the heavenly imperial court. I don't know how long I walked, but I found that I really went to the heavenly continent. What surprised me was that there were actually elves on this continent, but they were very weak. I lived on this continent and united the elves. Sometimes, I thought to myself, with my cultivation, which is considered a master in the heavenly imperial court, what kind of danger could I encounter on this continent? I'm almost immortal, so what's the point of this life and the afterlife? At this point, the elven empress smiled bitterly. Finally, one day, that sword appeared. The elven empress looked at the calamity sword in Chu Yang's hand. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Xue Leihan smiled bitterly. Sure enough, the root of the problem was back to the calamity sword. Actually, it was natural. With the Elven Empress's strength at the peak of the heavenly imperial court, she would be invincible in the heavenly continent without even needing to fight. If it wasn't for the Calamity Sword and its owner, how could there be an accident? The 5 elven gods also fixed their gazes on the Calamity Sword in Chu Yang's hand, with different expressions. Obviously, they didn't know what this sword had to do with what the Elven Empress said. That day, the heavenly continent suddenly collapsed without any warning. It was a catastrophic destruction that caused the most direct and complete destruction to the entire world and the entire plane. Then, someone used heaven-defying means to directly fold and reshape the heavenly continent. Until now, the means used by that mighty person are still completely beyond my understanding of power, or my survival instinct. And the last struggle of not wanting my fellow elves to die in front of me, I tried my best to lead all the elves to avoid the disaster, whether it was intentional or not. Anyway, that mighty person with heaven-defying abilities settled all the elves in a slightly more stable place. I can say with certainty that if it wasn't for that person's help, all the elves, including me, would have perished in that world-ending disaster. We were collectively settled in that new place, and we thought that the disaster was over. We thought that we could start a new life, but we didn't expect that the world would collapse again, and the end of the world would come again. The scale of this world-ending disaster was much smaller than the previous one. However, it was still not something that could be resisted by humans. Just as I was about to bring the elf race away from there and return to Heaven's imperial court, I realized that the chaos of creation could no longer be reversed. At least, there was nothing I could do about it. A voice that sounded like a sigh said to me, "I've ruined your present life, so I'll return you an afterlife." The elves were never spared. The entire race was annihilated, and I was only able to preserve the place where the elves lived, the City of Elves. However, the spring of life that represents the reproduction of the elves has finally dried up. All of this represents the end. The Elven Empress' voice was filled with exhaustion. Or perhaps there can be no construction without destruction. Anyway, it was at that time that I suddenly had an epiphany. I understood what I wanted. So I dispersed all of my cultivation to protect the lifeline of the Sky Elf clan. I dispersed the Elf Emperor's seal and only kept the last bit of my life. In the land of slumber. On that day, I made an oath to the world: if anyone brings the spring of life to my place of slumber and brings light to the elven race, and brings hope to the elven race, I will bestow the Elven Emperor's seal to him, until one day I suddenly woke up in the land of eternal slumber. I didn't know about my afterlife, but I also didn't dream about those beautiful women anymore. Because, after experiencing life and death, all of this seemed so absurd. But, finally, one day, this person came. His name is Chu Yang. He brought his sword and the spring of life to bring hope and light to the elves. Actually, at that time, the Elf Empress seal was already restless, and I also gave my approval. When I saw this person, I seemed to have a feeling. It seems that I've been waiting for him for a very, very long time. Or perhaps, it should be said that my slumber was to wait for his arrival. Now, the time that I've been waiting for is already in this life and the afterlife. Finally, the time that I've been waiting for has come, but it's already impossible for my life to recover. If I had met you in my youth back then, I would definitely have married you and become your most adorable wife. When the Elven Empress said this, her eyes looked deeply at Chu Yang. The tenderness in her eyes was boundless and undisguised. Chu Yang suddenly felt a sense of absent-mindedness and bitterness. Tears were already streaming down the faces of the 5 elven gods. We only knew that the elves stood aloof from worldly affairs and blindly let the elves live in seclusion. But we didn't know that such seclusion was actually equivalent to sealing off the human nature of the elves. Regardless of whether it's a human or an elf, when they're hungry, they have to eat. When they're thirsty, they have to drink water. When they're young, regardless of whether they're male or female, they all yearn for a love that belongs to them. The Elven Empress sighed softly. In the future, don't use external forces to control this kind of thing. Otherwise, the elves will be destroyed in this world sooner or later. Yes, the 5 elven gods replied in unison. The moment I saw him, I knew that it was already impossible for me. The so-called present life and the afterlife were nothing more than an obsession. And this person already had his lover long ago. So, I turned my soul into the purest creation primordial energy in the world, divided it into 4, and bestowed them to his wives respectively. At the end of my obsession, I've actually truly understood. I finally know what the so-called love feels like. There was satisfaction in the Elven Empress expression. When this last bit of my consciousness dissipates, I'll truly disappear from this world. The only thing that makes me feel gratified is that before my final disappearance, I've finally returned to my hometown. I've seen my long-lost kin again, and I have no more regrets in this life. The Elven Empress looked around her, full of longing. At this point, even Chu Yang, Xue Leihan, and the others felt a sense of sorrow. This Elven Empress, who looked weak and lovely, had never done any evil deeds in her life. She had devoted her entire life to the elves, whether it was the elves in the heavens or the elves in the heavens. As an empress, her greatest wish was to be able to marry and experience the taste of love like an ordinary woman. However, such an extremely ordinary wish was filled with twists and turns. From the beginning to the end, she still hadn't achieved it. Even if she said that she had tasted it now, it was only because she felt the same way and enjoyed the feelings of Zi Sheqing and the others. Now, this wisp of her soul was about to dissipate and enter the path of eternal silence. It was a pity that no matter how emotional they were, they couldn't help at all. Because the Elven Empress in front of them was only a wisp of her consciousness, the last bit of her life force. The Elven Empress calmly looked at Chu Yang. Her eyes were filled with boundless tenderness. She even smiled and said, "I really envy the 4 of them. So, I gave them my truest and purest wishes. You can rest assured that I haven't affected their minds from the beginning to the end. They are them, and I am me. I am only me." This sentence was a little vague and even a little incoherent. However, Chu Yang understood, really understood. "I understand. Thank you very much." The Elven Empress smiled a little warmly and a little sadly. "You're welcome. Actually, I should be the one thanking them. After following them, I finally understood what kind of feelings it is for a woman to fall in love with a man. It turns out that this is the most wonderful feeling in the world." She gazed at Chu Yang and said, "And a man like you who cares and cares for them in every possible way is even more intoxicating and mesmerizing. Chu Yang, I actually fell in love with you too. If there's a next life, I'll marry you, okay?" Everyone was silent for a while. This included Mo Qingwu, Zi Sheqing, and the other 2 girls. Logically speaking, a woman had suddenly appeared here and wanted to marry Chu Yang. Logically speaking, they should be extremely jealous and glaring angrily at that woman. But now, at this moment, they only felt a heartfelt sadness. How pitiful was this woman? Who could reject such an excessive request? At this moment, Chu Yang was also a little sad, but also a little amused. Now, he had basically reached the realm of immortality. If he could go one step further, he would even reach the realm of immortality. If that was the case, how could he have a next life? Seeing that Chu Yang didn't give an answer for a long time, the Elven Empress' eyes gradually dimmed. She said dejectedly, "Forget it." The 5 elven gods stared at Chu Yang with murderous eyes. Each of them looked as if they wanted to beat this guy into powder. "Her Majesty is about to disappear from this world. What can you do by coaxing her? It's just a sentence. Will you die? Or will you lose something? Do you have to be so hypocritical? Little bastard, little bastard. Anyway, no matter what you say, it's impossible. We don't need you to take responsibility. Are you not even willing to say a sentence?" Chu Yang suddenly smiled and said, "Her Majesty is a beauty that can topple nations. She's devastatingly beautiful and gentle. I also like her very much." The Elven Empress' eyes lit up. Full of hope, she asked, "Then, if there's a next life, how about I marry you?" This woman didn't even try to hide her feelings for him. She was so pure, yet so eager. Chu Yang nodded gently and said with a smile, "Okay." The Elven Empress suddenly smiled. Her eyes were full of tears. Looking at Chu Yang reluctantly, she said, "I know you're coaxing me, but I'm still very happy. I love you, Chu Yang. Do you know, when you didn't know my name, you once said, 'You'll dance with me, Cheung Xiao, and I'll conquer the world with you. I believe that at that time, you didn't know that Cheung Xiao was my name. Chapter 2644. At this moment, the Elven Empress' tone was actually a little mischievous. And, you dance with me, Cheung Xiao, and I'll accompany you to conquer the world. That's also my lifelong wish. Although it didn't really come true, there was still a man who said this, and that man is the man I love. Chu Yang's heart shook. He recalled that he had said these words to his brothers more than once in the past. However, she had never thought that this sentence would be such a beautiful dream for a woman. This was almost every woman's dream. You dance with me, Cheung Xiao. I'll accompany you to conquer the world. This was also a kind of inseparability, and it was a true inseparability at the peak. Then, the Elven Empress' body swayed slowly. She said, I'm going to disappear. You have the Elven Emperor seal with you. From now on, you're the Elven Empress of the Elven race. Chu Yang, my husband, Grandpa Arrow God. I'm sorry. Goodbye, my wish has come true, I'm very satisfied. The Elven Empress figure gradually became illusory and dispersed like smoke, but her eyes were fixed on Chu Yang's face. They were dreamy and full of affection. I want to kiss you. She suddenly tried her best to float closer to Chu Yang, wanting to kiss him. Chu Yang didn't dodge. Any extra movement at this moment was equivalent to blaspheming the Elven Empress' true feelings. Chu Yang couldn't dodge, and he couldn't bear to. However, the last bit of movement was all in vain. Her red lips, which had already dispersed into smoke, had completely dispersed the moment they touched Chu Yang's face. In the end, Chu Yang didn't feel this kiss. The Elven Empress Wu Cheung Xiao didn't complete this kiss after all. And it dissipated, it seemed. All that was left was a sigh. This Elven Empress, who had been pure and flawless all her life, wanted to kiss the face of the man she loved at the last moment of her life. Such a small wish. She didn't even manage to do it. The Elven Empress completely dissipated, and the 5 elven gods burst into tears, especially the Arrow God, who was even more devastated. At this moment, Chu Yang's heart was also a little sour. He didn't love the Elven Empress, but he pitied her a little. He couldn't let her pass away without regrets. To Chu Yang, this was also a pity. Following the disappearance of the Elven Empress, the radiance emitted from the bodies of Mo Qingwu and the other 3 also gradually disappeared into their bodies. The 4 women gathered around Chu Yang. Even Zi Sheqing, who was the most powerful, was no exception at this moment. After witnessing the passing of this peerless beauty and hearing her inner voice, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. It made the 4 women feel that in this world, there was nothing more important than having their loved ones by their side. There was also, at this moment, the way the 5 elven gods looked at the 4 of them truly frightened them. Their gazes were fanatical and sorrowful. Even though the 4 women were all experts. But under such a peculiar gaze, she felt uncomfortable all over. She felt the safest by Chu Yang's side. As the person they loved, and also the person who loved them, if they didn't use such a safe haven now, when would they? Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said in a low voice, just now, you did the right thing. Mo Qingwu and the other 3 said in unison. Then, they looked at each other embarrassedly. Then, Tai Butian said on behalf, she's really too pitiful. I can't help but feel pity for her. So cute and beautiful. Such a gentle beauty, yet she has to be alone for the rest of her life, waiting for the rest of her life. After hearing about her experience, our hearts also ached. She only has this one wish in her life. If you still can't fulfill it, that's too cruel. Chu Yang sighed. At this moment, how could he not have such thoughts in his heart? Otherwise, he wouldn't have stood still and let the Elven Empress do whatever she wanted. Yes, this Elven Empress Wu Cheungxiao was really too pitiful. Chu Yang couldn't even understand why the heavens would choose to torture such a peerless beauty. The only wish in her life, which could be said to be an extremely humble wish, was still not fulfilled even when she died and her will dissipated. How cruel the heavens were. A pure and clean life. This was truly the path of purity and purity in this life. Chu Yang and the others sighed in their hearts. The 5 elven gods walked toward them and looked at Chu Yang. Everyone's eyes and expressions were full of endless support and fanaticism. That was a feeling that went deep into their bones. Then, the 5 of them knelt down and said in unison, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Chu Yang was shocked when he heard that. Chu Yang didn't have time to think and hurriedly dodged. "Since when did I become the Elven Empress? What's with this? I'm a purebred human, okay? I was already very depressed when I was slandered as a mixed breed. Now, it's even worse. I'm a complete mutant now. Do you think I don't know that the Elven Empress must be a purebred elf? How can you tell that I'm a purebred elf? This is too ridiculous." Seeing the confusion on his face, the god of archery explained with a smile, "Your Majesty, you have the Elven Emperor seal, the highest imperial seal of the elven race. Since the Elven Emperor seal has recognized you as its master, then, you are our Elven Empress." He looked at the stunned and helpless Chu Yang with a doting look on his face. It was a kind of fondness that he couldn't get enough of. He said, "Also, you are someone personally recognized by Her Majesty, and you are our Empress husband. Then, if you are not the Elven Empress, who else is?" His words were so shocking that Chu Yang was completely dizzy. "This works too." What's this? How did I become the Elven Empress husband? Could he be any more ridiculous? Could he be any more ridiculous? Your Excellency, God of Archery, let's be frank. Everyone knows that what happened just now was just a temporary expedient. Chu Yang's mouth was dry. Senior God of Archery, what you said is too much. This is not something that can be joked about. It's too childish. Joke? Childish? We don't have the slightest intention of joking with you. How can such an important decision be childish? The god of archery said seriously. Chu Yang, you have only been in the imperial court for a short period of time. This is indeed a tradition of the elven race, and it has been so since ancient times. Shui Leihan added, the situation now is as such. You can't reject it. The Elven Emperor's seal is with you, so you are the successor Elven Empress. It is your responsibility to lead the elven race. With Chu Yang's intelligence, he could naturally tell that there was too obvious a hint in Shui Leihan's words. The elven race was a rather huge force. They were about to fight against the extraterrestrial demons. That was a great help. However, no matter how great the help was, Chu Yang was still unwilling to be this so-called Elven Empress. If the key lies in the inheritance of the Elven Emperor's seal, Chu Yang pondered and said, why don't you find another elf with excellent aptitude? I will try to find a way to transfer the Elven Emperor's seal back to the elf you have chosen, and let everything return to the right track. What do you think? Chu Yang's sudden words almost caused the god of archery and the demon empress Shui Leihan to break down. Try to transfer it. What do you think the Elven Emperor's seal is? You mustn't. The god of archery jumped up. The Elven Emperor's seal is definitely not allowed to be transferred. Once the owner of the Emperor's seal gives up on it, the Emperor's seal will dissipate immediately. Unless what? Chu Yang asked. As long as there was the word unless, it meant that there was hope. Chu Yang really didn't want to be that Elven Empress. Unless the owner of the Elven Emperor's seal dies or disappears. Only then will the Elven Emperor's seal dissipate. But it will definitely not be transferred to someone else. The god of archery was almost crying. This was the Elven Empress, the Empress of a race. With the strength of the Elven race, they could almost be above the heavens and the earth. How could there be someone so unwilling? Could it be that the world has really changed? Could it be that the Elven race is doomed? Chu Yang was stunned. It couldn't be transferred. Unless it died. Even if it died, it would only dissipate. For a moment, Chu Yang was really at a loss. He murmured, but I am so busy every day. Where do I have the time to be your Elven Empress? Is there really no other way? Chu Yang was very depressed. The 5 elven gods were also elders who had lived for countless years. Even if they weren't the smartest people, they were still very wise. They immediately understood Chu Yang's concerns and couldn't help but laugh. If you become the Elven Empress, you won't need to stay in the Elven race. You don't have to stay in the Elven territory for a long time. You can still do whatever you want. We won't interfere with your freedom. Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. I see. As long as you don't disturb my normal life, there is room for discussion. The 5 elven gods laughed dryly. What kind of person is this? Is it so unfair for you to be our elven empress? The god of strength, who had the most straightforward personality, rubbed his hands and said hesitantly, I heard that your majesty has the spring of life. But how much exactly do you have? Do you have any leftovers? Hearing this, Chu Yang's expression also became strange. A surplus? Could it be that the elven race in the heavenly imperial court also doesn't have the spring of life? The 5 elven gods had awkward looks on their faces. After a while, the archer god laughed bitterly and said, Your Majesty, yes, our clan's spring of life has been treasuring and carefully protecting it all these years. However, without the support of the Elven Emperor's seal, our clan's spring of life has been decreasing year by year. It can be said that our situation has been deteriorating over the years. Now, we're almost at the bottom, the 5 elven gods sighed at the same time. It's precisely because of such a problem with the spring of life that the elven race walked out of the elven forest and prepared to join the heavenly devil battlefield. Anyway, without the spring of life, the elven race is destined to gradually decline and wither. Why don't we take this opportunity to fight the heavenly devil battlefield to the death? At least, we can die with more vigor. Chapter 2646. But I didn't expect that there would be a glimmer of hope this time. First, Her Majesty returned, and now, His Majesty ascended the throne, and the Fairy Emperor's seal gathered once again. The Strength God said with some relief, It seems that the fairy race is magnanimous this time. Good people have good karma. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and looked at the Strength God. He thought, You guys have always been hiding in the mountains and forests. This time, you came out because you had no other choice. How dare you say that you are magnanimous? Sigh, as the Fairy Emperor, even I can't bear to listen to this, spring of life, I do have some. Chu Yang calculated in his heart. He definitely had a lot of spring of life on hand. But there was no such thing as too much. Who knew how much the fairy race needed, and how much he would have to give? 30%, 50%, 70%, or all of it. These were all unknown. But in the end, Chu Yang still decided that it would be worth it even if he had to give up all of the spring of life to save the elf race and to provide such a powerful assistance in the battle against the extraterrestrial demons. Moreover, he was the Fairy Emperor. He couldn't just stand in the toilet and not do anything. On the side, Mo Tianji frowned slightly. He wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't. I believe that my spring of life can solve the fairy race's urgent needs. Chu Yang said lightly, Since I am the Fairy Emperor, I naturally have to do something for the fairy race. Leave the fairy race's lack of spring of life to me. When Chu Yang said this, the 5 fairy gods were overjoyed. They knew that Chu Yang, the Fairy Emperor, was suddenly forced to do something beyond his ability. It was too sudden, and it was impossible for someone who wasn't an fairy to suddenly become the Fairy Emperor to hold all the real power. If Chu Yang really acted like a tyrant now, the 5 fairy gods might not listen to him ordering them to do this and that, and the fairy race might even riot. Even if they tried their best, it would be like they were obeying on the surface but opposing on the inside. The current situation was, the Fairy Emperor's seal had coincidentally landed on Chu Yang, which was equivalent to binding Chu Yang. Since Chu Yang was willing to contribute to the spring of life, even if the fairy race's declining situation couldn't be completely resolved, there was at least room for improvement. It could be said to be a pretty good result. On this basis, the fairy race would do something for Chu Yang. So, it was only natural for them to accept Chu Yang's orders. But Minister Chu obviously hadn't finished speaking. The 5 elven gods immediately understood. He knew that the real show was about to begin. The elf emperor that he had just acknowledged was going to negotiate with them. However, everyone was already mentally prepared and did not feel that it was sudden. "Your Majesty, please speak," the five said in unison. "I also don't have any conditions, just one." Chu Yang said seriously, "The experts of the elf clan must accompany me to exterminate the extraterrestrial demons. The expert I'm talking about. It means that the elves must send out all their elites and must not be negligent." Previously, Chu Yang had also thought that the elves had come out in large numbers to fight against the extraterrestrial demons because there was no hope left. But if he gave them hope, would they shrink back? However, this concern only flashed through his mind. With the pride of the elves, such a thing would happen. It was absolutely impossible. Just this. The five elven gods were a little surprised by Chu Yang's condition. "This is enough." Chu Yang nodded seriously. "That's easy. Can this still be used as a condition?" The five elven gods heaved a sigh of relief and smiled with relief. "The elves came out this time to kill the extraterrestrial demons. Even if your Majesty didn't mention it, we would still have to fight. We can't pull out the bridge after crossing the river." "Ha ha." At the side, Mo Tianji relaxed his brows and heaved a sigh of relief. This was also what he was worried about just now. It was not that he was trying to be petty, but this battle was really too crucial. A huge force like the elf clan was also very important. They could not afford any mishaps. Therefore, Mo Tianji was also worried about personal gains and losses. "Yes, so I didn't negotiate with you at all." Chu Yang narrowed his eyes and smiled. Hearing that this was not a condition, with Minister Chu's shrewdness, he naturally changed the topic immediately. The shamelessness of a certain king of hell. Everyone was already used to this. It was just that the five elven gods had never dealt with someone before, so naturally, they were at a disadvantage. Therefore, the five elven gods were depressed again. "We were just saying it to express our clan's sense of right and wrong. You really went along with it." The saint had been defeated, and the situation was set. Everyone knew that from now on, the imperial court was bound to usher in unprecedented chaos. The Saint Emperor Palace's strength, which belonged to the saint, would definitely bring about huge losses to the imperial court. However, after this wave of chaos, great chaos would inevitably be followed by great governance. It could be expected that there would truly be long-term peace and stability. Of course, this was on the premise that the extraterrestrial demons were completely eliminated. "How's the latest news?" Shui Leihan asked when he heard the jingling sounds on Mo Tianji's body. Ever since he revealed his identity as the head of the Heavenly Secrets Intelligence Department, Mo Tianji couldn't wait to fully release this sound. This was because with the Heavenly Secrets hands on him, there would be news coming every time. Every piece of news couldn't be heard by others, but all the vibrations had to be borne by him alone. It wasn't that big of a commotion, but if it was too frequent, it could really annoy him to death. Even though it wasn't a big commotion, he could feel his heart being shaken to the point of being unwell at all times. Once he let it go, he naturally felt a lot better. It was just that during the time when Chu Yang was talking to the five elven gods, the jingling sounds had rung no less than hundreds of times. These hundreds of times meant that there were hundreds of the latest news coming from all over the world. Shui Leihan had always been very surprised by this. How could this thing be carried around to receive news? Because he, the demon empress, and even the saint didn't have such a thing. The latest news. Mo Tianji read as he spoke. Unexpectedly, he himself couldn't help but chuckle first. "The world is really in chaos." Mo Tianji smiled and said, "The first thing is that after the great emperor of the extreme heaven Wu Shong received the news we released, he immediately announced to the world that Chu Yang is the minister of the Jade Heavens, a position above the heavenly emperor. Anyone in the extreme heaven who disagrees will be killed without mercy. This is a beautiful move, awesome." Shui Leihan and the demon empress clapped and praised at the same time. As the spiritual pillar of the imperial court for a long time, the saint emperor had suddenly fallen. Then, there would definitely be turbulence in the imperial court. Many people who were used to heroes would find it hard to accept at the moment. And at this time, a new spiritual leader had to be pushed out immediately and cleanly to be the new spiritual pillar of the imperial court. And Chu Yang was the best candidate to replace the Saint Emperor now. Although Dong Wushang was used to being magnanimous, this move was exceptionally well done. It was very timely and could be said to be extremely beautiful. Mo Tianji smiled bitterly in his heart. When Shui Leihan and Yaro Shina said that it was beautiful, he knew what they were thinking. They would definitely think that Dong Wushang was far-sighted and prepared for a rainy day, but, with Mo Tianji's understanding of Dong Wushang, this guy definitely wouldn't think so far ahead. Most likely, this fellow was doing this purely to push his boss up to the top. As for the far-reaching impact and profound meaning, Dong Wushang probably didn't have any of that in his mind. Shui Leihan and Yaro Xin really praised the wrong person for praising Dong Wushang. Beautiful? The 5 elven gods only noticed the name Cheong Xiao minister and couldn't help but applaud and praise. It is indeed beautiful. Her Majesty's name is also in it. It is indeed a match made in heaven, a perfect match. Mo Tianji, Shui Leihan, and the others all looked at the 5 elven gods speechlessly. This Cheong Xiao was not the same Cheong Xiao. Although the names were exactly the same, the meaning was completely different. You elves really know how to flatter yourselves. But if they really wanted to interpret it this way, there was really no way. Actually, the real problem was Dong Wushang was now in the extreme heavens. How would he know who Wu Cheong Xiao was? Xiedan Cheong coughed and said, in fact, the name Minister Cheong Xiao was given to Big Brother by the few of us at that time, because Big Brother used to be a minister in the lower 3 heavens. And his reputation as a minister shook the world. Cough cough. At this point, he looked at Tai Butian a little awkwardly. Tai Butian smiled and said, yes, at that time, he was my minister. At the mention of he was my minister, Tai Butian's eyes lit up and a sense of happiness rose in her. Recalling the bits and pieces back then, Tai Butian suddenly felt that she had nothing more to ask for in this life. Back then, Chu Yang entered Iron Cloud alone with one sword and supported her side by side. Through all kinds of despair and dangers, they fought step by step. In the past, Bu Tiantai and Minister Chu were at the end of the road. They fought hard to rule over the world and rule over the world. Every time Tai Butian thought of this experience, she would feel that her happiness was already incomparable. Mo Qingwu, Zi Sheqing, and the others looked at Tai Butian with some envy, unconcealable envy. Because during that period of time, other than Wu Chanxian, the two of them couldn't compare at all. Mo Qingwu was a little better. She had at least interacted with Chu Yang before. Unfortunately, she was still a little girl at that time. She only acted cute and coquettish for a few days before returning for 3 days. As for Big Sister Z, it seemed that she only got to know a certain someone after a long time. That period of time belonged to Chu Yang and Tai Butian. At that time, everyone was still in their insignificant period. We once joked that if I became the Heavenly Emperor in the future, I would definitely respect the old minister. The joke that day was still vivid in my mind and still ringing in my ears. I didn't expect Dong Wushang to do it before everyone else. Xie Danqiong smiled and said, the majesty of the heavens and the aura of Cheong Xiao is. Minister Cheong Xiao. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.